quiet foothills beneath Blue Mountain, sound travels differently. A car door slams and echoes longer than it should. A scream cuts sharper than the wind through the trees. Some say that gunshots in the country feel wrong in a way they don't in cities. They don't dissolve into traffic or sirens. They linger. They echo. They demand to be noticed. On the evening of September 22nd, the sound rolled off Blue Mountain and slipped through the trees along North Cottonwood Road. One shot, then another, then many more. Too many to be mistaken for hunting, too fast to be fireworks. Neighbors would later say they heard a woman cry out, "No, no, no." Then came the gunfire. 10, maybe 13 shots. Too many to count. Too many to undo. By the time patrol cars cut their headlights into the dark driveway, the noise had stopped. What remained was motion without life. 2 lives lay shattered on a dirt driveway. Candice Shuey, 22. Derek Henry, 36. And his green Chevy Lumina idling, windshield wiper swiping back and forth as if the car itself hadn't realized what had happened. And the man who pulled the trigger was already disappearing into the dark. You're listening to Departed in Pennsylvania, Deadly Triangle, the case of Candice Shuey and Derek Henry. Chapter 1, Territory and Trespass. A love triangle is often dismissed as drama, hurt feelings, jealousy, and rivalry. But on North Cottonwood Road in Lehigh Township, it became something far more lethal. The road itself is unassuming. Children grow up knowing every bend, every driveway. Doors are rarely locked. The woods press close to the pavement, intimate and quiet. But in a place where everyone knows everyone, intimacy can be a dangerous thing, especially when paired with resentment. Candice Shuey was at the center of it all. Born June 7, 1988, the youngest of 4 children, she was adored by her parents, Edwin and Darlette, and fiercely loved by her brothers. Candice was fearless, but not reckless, independent, yet deeply connected to home. A graduate of Northampton High School, she dreamed bigger than her small-town roots would allow. She studied modeling in Allentown, worked at a boutique in Bethlehem, and she found joy in four-wheelers and riding horses, especially with her beloved horse, Sassy Rose. Before anyone else, there was Barry Soldridge. To neighbors, he was personable, charming, the kind of man who could hold a conversation easily. A veteran of Operation Desert Storm, older than Candice, he lived with his parents on the same road. Candice dated Barry for a time, and while the relationship had moments of ordinary warmth, her mother Darlette noticed warning signs: withdrawal, unease, and subtle control. She worried that Barry was possessive and emotionally volatile. When Candice ended the relationship, her family felt relieved. Not joy, not celebration, just the quiet knowledge that a potentially dangerous situation had been avoided. During their relationship, Barry spent long nights in his garage, restoring a white, early 1970 Camaro that had belonged to a friend and neighbor, someone who loved racing the car along country roads. Barry poured time, energy, and attention into the project, meticulous and exacting, as if the work could anchor him in a world he felt slipping away. When the Camaro was finally finished, Candice's path shifted. She grew close to the car's owner, Derek Henry. Derek was steady, dependable, and quiet. Protective, where Candice was adventurous, calm, and bright. Their bond developed naturally, rooted in shared experiences, trust, and ordinary moments of joy. Eventually, she told Barry she no longer wanted to see him and began dating Derek. To Candice's family, it was a relief. Finally, she was with someone kind, someone stable, someone who treated her as an equal. Barry did not see it that way. For him, the breakup and Candice's new relationship were a personal affront he could not forgive. Barry had never really left North Cottonwood Road. His identity and sense of control were rooted there. Candice's decision to move on, with another man from the same road, was, in his mind, humiliation. The proximity made the tension combustible. Arguments and threats escalated. Raised voices echoed through the trees. Neighbors noted the friction, the careful circling of two men who had no reason to be enemies. Yet the air between Barry and Derek was thick with rivalry. Barry did not adapt. He stewed, framing himself as the injured party. Candice hadn't left. She had betrayed. Derek hadn't dated. He had provoked. His internal narrative allowed no shared agency, only trespass. By September 22nd, 2010, the fuse was already burning. Chapter 2. The Storm Breaks. September 22nd, 2010, began without warning. That evening, Candice Shuey and Derek Henry were visiting friends Jason Kern and Hillary Blaze at their mobile home on North Cottonwood Road. The air outside was thick with humidity, the sky swollen with a storm not yet unleashed. Inside, for a few fragile hours, everything felt ordinary, familiar, safe. The calm was fractured when Barry Soldridge arrived. He came unannounced, uninvited, charged. Jason noticed it first. The rigidity in Barry's shoulders, the tightness in his jaw, the way his eyes locked into Candice and Derek and did not let go. Whatever resentment had been building in him had not faded with time. It had hardened. Small talk collapsed quickly. Words sharpened. Hillary tried to ease the tension, her voice careful, but the air in the room had already changed. Candice stood up first. Derek followed. Then Barry did too. The three stepped outside into the damp night, the trailer door closing behind them. Under the low growl of distant thunder, the argument escalated. Voices rose, overlapped, cut into one another. Candice tried to disengage. Derek refused to back down. Barry's anger pressed forward, relentless. Rain began to fall, light at first, then steadier. At some point, Barry broke away, and Candice and Derek remained outside for a moment, shaken, but still alive in the storm's electric charge. When the rain intensified, they hurried into Derek's green Chevy Lumina. The engine turned over. Headlights sliced through the growing downpour. Windshield wipers beat against the glass in urgent rhythm. They thought the confrontation was over. They were wrong. Around the same time, Barry pulled into his parents' driveway less than a mile away. The storm finally broke in full, thunder cracking overhead, lightning splitting the sky. He was soaked, furious, breathing hard. He stormed inside. The night wasn't finished. He said to his mother, "I want my gun." The words weren't shouted. They were ice. Final. He barreled down the hallway, kicking in his younger brother's locked bedroom door. The wood splintered under the force. He then seized a rifle. His mother, Donna Soldridge, watched helplessly as her son's face hardened with grim determination. He said, "Derek got in my face. I'm going to kill him." There was a brief pause, and the weight of Barry's words hanging in the air, heavier than the storm outside. Then, Barry walked into the night, rifle in hand. Back inside the trailer where Jason and Hillary live, both tried to settle their nerves. As they were just getting used to the quiet, Barry Soldridge came back. They could hear his vehicle pulling up, tires crunching against the gravel. Then, the trailer door opened. Barry stepped into the doorway, rain clinging to his clothes. His expression altered. No longer shouting. No longer explosive. Worse, he was calm. His voice was low, almost conversational. "I should just shoot them both," he said. "I've got a machine gun in my trunk." The words hung in the cramped living room. This was no longer an argument. Something had shifted. Minutes later, the storm of gunfire, those sounds, were the bullets that tore through Derek's Chevy Lumina, shattering the driver's side window. Upon being hit, Derek's body convulsed under multiple impacts, his head and torso riddled. He slumped forward, slouched over the steering wheel, headlights still on, windshield wipers cutting the rain like knives. Candice ran. 50 yards down the dirt road, a single bullet ripped through her vital arteries and lung tissue. She collapsed into the dark alone. One bullet ended everything. Inside the mobile home, Hillary Blaze froze, terror searing through her. Bullets shredded the siding. The bathroom exploded. Shards of glass, porcelain, and metal scattering like confetti. She heard Barry's voice, furious, disbelieving, betrayed. Smoke curled through the air. Every surface bore the marks of rage unleashed. For minutes, the echoes of gunfire throbbed like a heartbeat gone wrong, leaving hollow silence in their wake. Jason ran outside and stopped at the car. Derek, slumped behind the wheel, was already gone. The headlights cut through the storm, the windshield wipers still lashing the downpour. Jason lowered his head, unable to look away. The evidence of Barry's fury, of his obsession, confronted him, horrifying in its finality. Fear gripped Jason and Hillary's hearts. Every shadow threatened. Every raindrop whispered a warning. They called 911 and zigzagged across the wet fields, hunted by the realization that Barry could still come for them. The storm raged on, indifferent to the destruction below it. Chapter 3: Flight and Capture. When state troopers arrived, the scene spoke before anyone could. Derek's green Chevy Lumina still idled, headlights cutting pale beams through the sheets of rain. The windshield wipers still slapped the glass, as if the car itself hadn't comprehended the carnage it bore witness to. The wounds on both Candice and Derek were unmistakable. Candice's body lay where it had fallen, twisted and alone in the mud-slicked driveway. Derek slumped in the driver's seat, fragmented and shattered by the bullets that had ended his life in seconds. Neighbors later reported a silver Mercury Cougar speeding out of the driveway. They remembered the car. Everyone did. Its sudden flight through the storm was as shocking as the devastation it left in its wake. Meanwhile, Barry's destination was near, his parents' home. But he did not arrive triumphant. He was unraveling. Tears streaked his face. He paced. He repeated himself over and over, a mantra of disbelief. Finally, he told his mother, Donna, with cold finality, "I killed Derek." But Barry did not stop. Not yet. Barry fled again, contacting coworkers and friends. To one, he confessed fully. To another, he spoke in fragments, clipped, evasive. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside him. Chaotic, unpredictable, unrelenting. Minutes later, he called his former boss, James Frank. They had planned a routine trip to Maryland the next day to repair fire engines. That night, however, Barry was not himself. His voice was flat, controlled. When James asked what had happened, Barry said only, "I did something bad." As the conversation continued, the truth spilled into pieces. Barry admitted to shooting Derek. Then, almost casually, he added that Candice had run into a nearby field. The words were delivered without panic, without hesitation, clinical, detached, horrifying in their calm precision. Later that evening, Barry sat in James's living room. He sat with his head in his hands, quietly watching television, as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. The murders, the chaos, the storm, they were already behind him, reduced to a surreal, almost mundane memory. Before dawn, Pennsylvania State Police arrived, a spotlight cutting through the darkness outside the house. Barry was taken into custody without incident. The officers told him he was facing 2 counts of homicide for the deaths of Candice and Derek. He lowered his head and said nothing. Investigators would later note a chilling detail. Barry confessed easily, but selectively. He admitted to killing Derek. When told Candice had also died, he appeared genuinely surprised. To detectives, that distinction was unnerving. The rifle he had used, the instrument of death, was nowhere to be found. On the morning of September 23, 2010, the district attorney announced that Barry Soldridge had been apprehended. 38 years old, he was arraigned later that Thursday on homicide charges in connection with the deaths of both Candice and Derek. He was ordered held without bail. The DA outlined the gravity of the charges. Though filed under general criminal homicide, the evidence pointed premeditation, and the case would be prosecuted as first-degree murder. The DA confirmed that the state would seek the death penalty. The judge then ordered that Barry be held for trial in Northampton County. The law had set its gaze on him, and the echoes of that night, the gunfire, the terror, the lives ended, were already haunting the courtroom that would follow. Chapter 4: The Courtroom. Nearly 13 months later, in early October of 2011, the trial began. The air in the Northampton County courtroom was heavy, thick with anticipation, as Barry Soldridge entered to face 2 counts of first-degree murder and the possibility of death. The courtroom waited. Every heartbeat, every whisper became amplified. This was a case defined by obsession, rage, and the sudden extinguishing of 2 lives. Barry's eyes flickered briefly towards the rows of relatives and friends of the victims. A glance, barely a flicker, before he took his seat, silent and still. Around him, the courtroom hummed with restrained energy. His defense spoke first. The defense did not deny that Barry fired the shots. Instead, they painted a narrative of chaos, passion, not calculation. Candice was collateral damage, they said, caught in a storm she never sought. Barry had snapped. He had not planned. But the prosecution offered a darker truth. This was no accident. This was jealousy hardened into intent. Threats had been made, words spoken. A weapon was retrieved, a deliberate return to the scene. Months before the killings, Barry had spoken of blowing away the couple, of sniping them. On September 22, 2010, he had time to think. He left the argument. He drove home. He smashed a locked door. He took a rifle. He loaded it. He fought with his brother. Then he returned. This was no impulsive act. It was a sneak attack. Shots fired with purpose, aimed at Derek, with Candice as inevitable collateral. The prosecution rested. Jason Kern had known Barry since they were 8 years old. The boy who rode bikes until dark, the teenager who slept on his couch, the friend who once felt like family. In the courtroom, Jason could not look at Barry. He sat stiffly, tissue clenched, eyes fixed past the jury. The man at the defense table was no longer the friend he knew. Whatever had been once Barry had been swallowed by something darker. Jason testified that Candice Shuey was where it began. When she ended her relationship with Barry and started dating Derek, Barry simply didn't grieve. He unraveled. He obsessed, replayed conversations, dissected perceived slights, and interpreted her happiness as humiliation. At first, it sounded like heartbreak. Then the language changed. Revenge, embarrassment, possession. Jason's girlfriend, Hillary Blaze, described the same slow descent. Barry would stew, jaw tight, voice low, eyes following Candice. He monitored her, spoke of harming them, of picking them off, one by one. Threats weren't jokes, not drunken exaggerations. They were repeated, refined, and specific. And yet, no one called the police. That night, on September 22nd, 2010, began ordinarily. Candice and Derek visited Jason and Hillary's mobile home. The evening was quiet and damp, a brief attempt at normalcy. Hillary said that she had rarely seen Candice relaxed in months. That night, they talked. Candice was lighter than she had been in a long time. Happy. At peace. That peace only lasted a few minutes. By then, Barry had arrived. He saw Candice with Derek. Hillary recalled that Barry's posture stiffened and his expression hardened. Whatever restraint he clung to snapped. Candice, Derek, and Barry stepped outside to argue. Both Jason and Hillary remained inside, exhausted from mediating and absorbing their resentment. Voices rose. Then silence. Hillary then said the gunfire came. Explosive cracks tore through the thin trailer walls. Bullets punched through aluminum and drywall as if they were paper. Inside, Hillary heard Barry shouting, disbelief, fury, betrayal. Glass shattered. Porcelain exploded. The shower door disintegrated. Hillary froze, certain she would die. Outside, Derek sat behind the wheel of the green Chevy Lumina. Headlights cast pale beams across the wet gravel. Windshield wipers moved back and forth, smearing rain across the shattered glass. When the DA asked Derek what he saw, the courtroom fell silent. Derek responded. He had been blown to pieces. Derek's mother gasped and sobbed into the back of the courtroom. Jason testified that he feared Barry wasn't finished, that the violence had not yet burned itself out, that it was still moving, still searching. Prosecutors laid out the evidence clinically: trajectory analysis, ballistics, and photographs, opportunity, deliberation, escalation. Their theory was not passion, it was progression. Jealousy nurtured, resentment rehearsed, spoken again and again until they no longer sounded speculative. Then, a decision. A weapon was retrieved. A return to the doorway. 2 lives erased on a quiet stretch of North Cottonwood Road. The question hanging over the courtroom was no longer whether Barry pulled the trigger. It was whether the murders had been building all along. Whether they began not with gunfire, but the first time Barry said he would do it. Chapter 5: Bloodlines and Betrayal. The courtroom was tense, every eye fixed on the final witnesses. Barry's mother and brother took the stand. Their words carried the weight of disbelief, heartbreak, and fear. They described a man they barely recognized: the son, the brother, the familiar face of North Cottonwood Road. Someone transformed into a stranger. Barry's mother spoke first, her voice trembling, but resolute. She had feared anger, confrontation, perhaps embarrassment, but never murder. Then came a revelation that silenced the courtroom. Barry and Derek were distant cousins. A bloodline tangled with betrayal, with love, and with rage that had festered unnoticed, buried beneath familiarity. Barry's brother Joseph sat tensely. He refused to say his brother had killed anyone, despite the defense's own admission. Only under persistent questioning from the prosecution did he reveal the terrifying truth. He had tried to stop Barry. Twice, he wrestled for the rifle. Twice, he risked his own life. At one point, Barry had turned the gun on him. The tension in the room thickened. Jurors leaned forward, some holding their breath. The defense framed the night as a slow boil, confrontations stacking upon one another until Barry finally snapped. The shots fired into the lumina, they said, were reckless, furious, but not impulsive, not deliberate. Candice, they claimed, was never meant to die. The jury would see it all: the simmering jealousy, the repeated threats, the murders themselves, and the wreckage that followed. Now, with the evidence and testimony laid bare, the world would bear witness. Chapter 6: The Verdict. The jury deliberated for 1 hour and 45 minutes. Then they returned. Their verdict? Guilty of first-degree murder. Twice. Quiet cheers rippled through the courtroom. Derek's mother's tears fell freely. Candice's mother collapsed inward, sobbing silently into a tissue. Barry Soldred showed no emotion. He stared straight ahead as the world settled around him. The jury would then return for the penalty phase to decide whether he would spend the rest of his life in prison or be put to death. The case was not over, but the truth had been spoken. Chapter 7. The Sentence. By the time Barry entered the courtroom on October 14, 2011, the case was over in every way that mattered. Guilt was no longer in question. What remained was how the state would respond. Barry faced the possibility of death for murdering 2 people, Candice and Derek. 12 jurors would have decided whether he would die or spend life in prison. Instead, the process stopped. Quietly, the case shifted. Barry agreed to a deal. In exchange for giving up all rights to appeal, he would receive 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. No retrials, no future hearings. The door would close and stay closed. One matter remained unresolved: the rifle. For nearly 2 years, the .223 caliber weapon used to kill Candice and Derek had never been found. Its absence lingered, a haunting, unfinished detail in a case otherwise full of answers. As part of the agreement, Barry told police where it was. State troopers followed his directions to an abandoned car near his parents' home. Inside the trunk, they found the rifle, silent, intact, waiting. The next morning, troopers carried it into court, sealed in a long white box. No one asked to see it opened. The prosecution requested that it be destroyed. It had already done its damage. Then Barry spoke. His voice was thinner, quieter, but controlled. He addressed Derek, not as a victim, but as a cousin. He acknowledged that Derek and Candice, who he called Candy, had been good together. Barry then spoke directly to the victims' families. There's no excuse for what I did. Derek was a really good friend to me. Candy and Derek were a good couple. I have to live with murdering 2 people for the rest of my life. I was a monster that night. Candice's mother, Darlette, and her aunt sobbed quietly. Both did not look at him. Darlette later carried a framed photograph of Candice to the podium. She reminded the judge and the courtroom who Candice had been. Her only daughter. A daughter who dreamed, who laughed, who had fallen in love with Derek on July 4th in Atlantic City. The night that Candice was killed, police came to the family home looking for someone. Neighbors called. Hours passed. At 3 a.m, the state police confirmed what the family had already feared. Candice was dead. Darlette said the family felt relief that the rifle had been recovered and that no other parent would have to live with unanswered questions. But relief did not mean healing. Nothing would ever be the same. The presiding judge removed his glasses and wiped his eyes. Derek's mother read a statement aloud, speaking of the life her son would never live. Marriage, children, grandchildren, the small details, the permanent absences. Barry's attorneys did not expect him to speak. The deal had brought finality. No appeals, no return. The judge imposed the sentence: 2 life terms, no parole, no return. Barry was led away. The rifle would be destroyed. The case was closed. And on North Cottonwood Road, the quiet that followed was not peace. It was an absence. Epilogue. What remains? The case of Candice Shuey and Derek Henry did not end with the verdict. Years later, new questions surfaced, not about what happened on North Cottonwood Road, but about what Barry understood when he chose to live. He accepted 2 consecutive life sentences for the murders of Candice Shuey and Derek Henry. He waived his appeals. He revealed where he had hidden the rifle. The bargain closed the door. Or so it seemed. Later filings claimed Barry had not fully understood what he surrendered, that he had given up the chance to challenge his trial attorney or present evidence of possible brain damage. Barry had been allowed to speak. He had made his choice. The sentences would stand. Barry was sent to the State Correctional Institution at Huntington. No parole, no release, no return. Candice was 22. Derek was 36. They were not statistics. They were the reason this story existed. The silence they left behind endured. In June of 2012, Candice's parents filed a civil lawsuit, one that reached beyond Barry himself. They argued his family bore responsibility for failing to secure firearms, despite clear warning signs. It was not about vengeance. It was about responsibility. The lawsuit forced a reckoning that the criminal case could not answer. When did love become enabling? When did silence become complicity? At what point did inaction carry its own moral weight? North Cottonwood Road grew quiet again. The woods reclaimed their stillness. Cars passed without slowing. But nothing returned to normal. Silence was not healing. Candice never became what she dreamed of, not because she failed, but because her life was taken from her. Derek never got the chance to drive away that night. Families were left with court transcripts, unanswered questions, and memories frozen in time. A love triangle is often framed as a story of choice. Here, the final choice was violence, and it erased every other possibility. 2 lives ended because one man could not accept that love belongs to no one. And in Pennsylvania, beneath the shadow of Blue Mountain, the echoes of that night still lingered. This concludes this week's episode of Departed in Pennsyltucky. I'm your host, Andrea Dudek. Tune in next week for more true crime talk without the Valley Girl squawk.